All right, so there have been several conversations as regards how badly albums have been performing in the Nigerian music industry. Do you agree with that train of thought?
I mean, to a large extent, yes. 2023 hasn't been the best year for albums, and albums have had really shorter lifespan, considering what we're used to. This year, people drop albums and people just move on. Artists drop albums and listeners just move on 2 weeks later. We've seen cases where these fans they hassle, they beg, they demand albums from these artists, right? So these artists drop this album and they move in 2 weeks later. So it's just really crazy out there right now, and it's not even a question of quality. Some of these albums are really really good, right? They're really good albums, but listeners just don't hang around enough. So you see albums get dropped, and 2 weeks later, people are just not going back to the album. It just feels like that particular album or this album did not even drop at all. So when people see albums have performed poorly in 2023, albums have had shorter lifespan, it's actually true, because it's very, very obvious if we look at the way albums have performed both on charts, both on the streets, both on reception. It's just not been really positive.
So, like, to find the root cause of this poorly performing albums, do you think the Nigerian music industry is suffering from saturation, like oversaturation?
Bro, right now, I think I used to say we're in the Afrobeats bull market.
Okay.
Like this is the most hectic, the most activity we've seen, especially commercially, we've seen Afrobeats. And we're at that point where supply has exceedingly surpassed demand. The number of contents that are being produced every week, the number of music that they're churning out every week, we just don't have the number of consumers to service that content. Understand? Like if you look at DSPs, right, the streaming numbers are growing, but it's still not anywhere remotely close to where we need it to be to service the content we're dropping. So artists are dropping music albums week in, week out, and they are competing for just a small amount of listeners. So these listeners cannot spend longer time on a particular project or a particular song, so they just listen to a bit here, they move on, listen to a bit here, they move on, listen to a bit there. So there's a lot of volume of materials coming out right now, and it's just like the when you compare it to the consumer base, the listener base, it just doesn't tally. The ratio is just really off, right? So it's a case of supply exceeding demand, and right now with that particular saturation, albums just appears to be a sort of a surplus to demand or surplus to requirement kind of situation.
All right. So we've discussed at length on how hit songs impact the music industry. Yeah. So do you?
Last week, right?
Yeah, last week. Yeah. So do you think these hit songs are affecting the attention these albums are supposed to receive?
To a large extent, yes. See, right now, I think everyone will agree. Like the way an album would perform, what determines the success of an album is largely shaped by the hit song that particular album produces. The number of hits that particular album delivers. There are albums that if they did not have hit songs, the conversation would be entirely different. Like good albums, so it's not like these albums are not even good. Like they're good, coherent, cohesive, like the materials are superb. But the fact that there's no commercial song in it, the conversation is entirely different. Right? So it's really, we're in a market right now where hit songs determine what goes, who's popping, who's not popping, what people want to listen to. So when artists drop album, listeners they go to that album, they poke around, right? They look for the commercial songs, the songs that have commercial meanings. They go play it and they move on. Nobody is listening to album the way we used to listen to it in the past, right? Like in the past, especially in the CD era, where albums drop, CD era, you buy your CD, you listen to the album holistically. You learn each track, the lyrics to each track, you write them down. It was a whole experience. Right now, it's just really different. It's really different. Even back in the day, right? If you want to listen to a particular track, you have to buy an album.
Yes.
If you want to listen to a particular song by P Square, you have to buy an album, right?
Album.
And that means you have to listen to everything. Or at least you buy a CD, a DJ mix that has a couple of that song with other songs in it. But now you can just go to DSP, pick the song you want to listen to that song and move on. So each singles are determining how listeners interact with albums, and it is contributing massively to the shorter lifespans albums are having. Because if your album doesn't have a hit song, it is entirely not in the conversation. People just move on. Like there are really good albums this year. For example, Chad Nonso Amadi. his album When It Blooms, fantastic album. See Joe Boy's album. A lot of good albums have dropped this year, right?
Yeah,
They have dropped this year, and after 2 weeks, like everyone just move on. I'm just wondering, like, what's happening now? You guys wanted this album, you guys begged for this album. This year, self, like if we're going to say albums that have performed like commercially very well this year, we'll say Davido's Timeless.
Yeah,
it's a very impactful album. The album had impact. Then Shay Vibes' Thy Kingdom Come, because he's having the moment, and his other album, so Vibe to Thy Kingdom Come, and Ashake's Work of Art. These albums on the commercial front, right? These are the albums that have performed very well this year, and they had hit songs from them, or at least a number of popular songs. But other albums, like good albums, they just get lost in translation, or I don't know, they just go under, and a good amount of this issue boils down to the fact that this album didn't produce a very, very strong hit song or songs to service consumer interest.
All right, so another factor, do you think longer album length is like also contributing to the issue of poor performing albums?
Bro, man, see, there's no way you drop a 15 to 17 track album that there will not be at least 4 to 5 fillers in it. It's just not possible. You cannot drop like a 17 track album that all the tracks will just
good, yeah.
spectacular. I mean, they can be spectacular to a particular listener. They will definitely not be spectacular to another listener, right? So there's going to be a bit of division on the quality of some tracks, right? And we mentioned that there's saturation.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough consumers to service the amount of content you're dropping. So the longer your album, the shorter the lifespan. That's just a fact. People can't spend that amount of time listening to 17 track album. Sorry, nobody has that time.
Wow.
Nobody has that time to spend listening to an album that goes on for 1 hour, because they have to move on to other materials, and it reduces the replay value. And when the replay value gets reduced, then the album definitely is going to have shorter lifespan. So the lengthier your album, the less chances it has to go commercial, except of course it has and its song. Yeah.
So since the album length is a problem, do you think artists should consider releasing shorter albums, like fewer songs on the album?
Well, this is a tricky one, Abi, because albums, right? They're a way for artists to show what they are made of. Quality, range, depth. You want to show you can do different things.
Yeah, versatile.
Versatility. You want to show range. You want to show that you can explore different genres, and you need the space to do this, the space to explore, and that is going to maybe lead to a populated album in track listing, right? But artists they need to be realistic and adjust according to the market. You look at the atmosphere, you look at the consumer behavior, and see what is going on. A 15 track album, how is it going to bounce off the consumers? How are they going to receive it? Are they going to like it? So personally, right, I think yes, artists need to find a way to reduce the tracks on the album. No need for 15 track album. Sorry, nobody got time for that. And nobody got time for that. 10 to 12 tracks, they're okay. 30 minutes playtime. Under 30 minutes playtime. That means it's easier to listen to, it's easily digestible, and it increases its replay value. Right? So now let's look at someone who's like done this shorter album playtime this year. She Vibes, for example. 2 albums this year, released barely 3 weeks apart.
Yeah.
Vibes to Thy Kingdom Come. Each album 10 tracks, less than 30 minutes, right? And it's easily digestible. People can relate to it. It increases replay value. That means people will always go back to the album. And if you look at the chart, if you look at Turntable album chart, that both albums have spent a ridiculous amount of time in the top 10. Practically the entire lifespan since the drop has been in the top 10. But when you drop a 15 track album, a 17 track album, it just reduces the replay value, because listeners cannot afford to be stressed. This is a time where listeners cannot even bother themselves to be stressed at all. So once they just listen and they're not clicking, it's not connecting, they're not going to go back to it. So I think it's something they should really consider, reducing the track list and the tracks on an album. Yeah.
All right, so talking about shorter album length, do you think another area artists can explore would be EPs, extended plays, and the likes?
To be honest, yes. Yes, because people are not f***ing with albums like that. Maybe you're dropping albums and people are listening to it and moving on 2 weeks later. So you have to ask yourself, what's the point? So if you don't have a business dropping albums, then don't drop an album. Do not drop an album if you do not have a business dropping albums. Right? So before you drop an album, you have to ask yourself, like, do I have the materials necessary, required to drop this album, right? Do I have the audience that will listen to this album? Is there a demand for this album? And especially now that even there might be a demand, but it doesn't necessarily translate to success. Take for example Runtown. Shout out Runtown. He dropped an album, Science.
He did.
Do you know how he was hassled into dropping the album by fans? Runtown, where are you?
I saw that.
Runtown, you have abandoned us.
Yeah, I saw
Runtown,
that.
you don't love us anymore. Runtown, drop an album for us now. He dropped an album. He did. And they moved on 2 weeks later. Nobody talks about the album. And so sometimes, even demand doesn't necessarily translate to success. And so you have to ask yourself, is it not better to drop 2 EPs in a year? 6 tracks. You know, it's easier to listen. It's easily digestible. It's more relatable. It's fun. And it's just really, it's easily consumable, right?
Yeah.
Listeners cannot afford to be stressed. EP is a very easy way to connect with them. EPs are just easier for listeners to enjoy compared to albums. So I think the way the market is right now, it doesn't favor albums. It doesn't, except of course you're big artist and you can count on that album getting a hit song. But if you cannot really count on that, I think it's safer to drop EPs. And let me just add, right? What are the reasons artists drop albums? It's to populate their discography. I mean, we are the commercial light of music, not just in Afrobeat, globally. People are selling their discography. I think Katy Perry just sold their discography recently. Over $200 million. Bieber sold his discography.
As well,
a lot of people are selling their discography. So, you know, and when it comes to discography, right, it's volume. The more the albums, the more the money you get. So that's why artists want to drop albums to populate their discography. But guess what? You can do this with EP. You can do this with an EP. EP is passes for an album, although it's a short form album, right?
Yeah.
And people will have to consider awards as well, right? They feel maybe there's a prejudice towards EPs when it comes to awards, but no longer the case. Even the Grammys are nominating EPs for album of the year, for best rap album and stuff like that. And even the Eddies have shown a willingness to nominate EPs, which is short form albums, for awards. Victori's Outlaw was nominated for album of the year, I think, yeah, and it's an EP. So yeah, if there's no if an album is too much lyrics, which is appearing to be what it is right now, then I think it's safer. It is more maybe cost effective to an extent to drop an EP. Yeah.
So you said something. I just wanted to pick a question from that. You said if you don't have business dropping an album, don't drop it. What do you think is that business of dropping an album?
Oh, I mentioned it right before you drop an album. You have to ask yourself: is there a market for this album?
Okay.
So if you are just an upcoming artist, right? You are just building your name. You've not really broken into the mainstream like the big guys, or you're not even a B-list artist. Let's say you're a C-list artist, right? You have like maybe 2 tracks that have resonated with a couple of listeners, and your name sounds familiar to a particular demography.
Yeah.
Then I don't think an album should be the next thing on your mind, right? You might want to use an album to show what you can do, but you can do it with an EP. It's easy. It's easier to make. It's cheaper, at least to an extent, you know, because that means you're producing lesser tracks. Yeah. So the mixing, the mastering, the production is going to be cheaper. Yeah. You know, the marketing will likely be cheaper.
A lot more affordable.
It's a lot more affordable compared to albums, right? Yeah. So you have to ask yourself, like, if you are in a position to drop an album. If you're not, you should maybe opt for an EP. And now, this we'll talk about EP. It's not restricted to just up and coming artists alone, no? Or even just just like emerging acts or middle class artists. It is what everyone should consider, no matter how big you are, right? If you drop an album, right? If you drop an album and it didn't work, you drop a 14-track album, 15-track album, and you're a superstar, and everybody slept on it, and people acted like the album never dropped. It felt like a prank. So there's no, like, if you're going to follow up with an album, the album has to be banging. Yeah. It has to be banging. And right now, what determines if an album is banging, to be fair, is the hit song in it. Forget about the fact that this album is compelling, has compelling quality. What determines commerciality is its song. So why not just drop an EP? Even you're a big artist, drop an EP, because listeners are not no disrespect to listeners or consumers, they are not appreciating albums because the market is saturated. They are tired. They have a lot on their plate to listen to, right? So why not drop an EP? So EPs are what everyone should consider because the way the industry looks right now, it feels like EPs are being favored, right? Especially among consumers. So it's something everyone should consider.
All right. So the final question I have for you: do you think the industry, the Nigerian music industry, need to return back to the days of hit albums?
Man, good old days.
Yeah.
Good old days. Remember those days when P Square, Tubaba,
Mavens.
they would drop albums and Nice's Gonga. So those albums like back to back, like all the albums, all the tracks on the albums, powerful songs, hit albums. I mean, we cannot bring back those days. Things have changed, right? We're no longer in the CD era, right? We're in the streaming era where people, they just cherry pick among songs on an album. They cherry pick. They don't really listen to an album holistically. The only people who go to an album and listen to it from top to bottom and try to like decipher it and analyze the track and enjoy it as an holistic body of work are probably conscious consumers, your fans, people who follow your music, right? But just ordinarily, market-wise, people don't consume albums like that, right? They just hear the popping song on the album and they just go with it. Just move on, right? So it is difficult to bring back the days of hit albums, but we can try. So I think right now, when in the market, because the situation right now is that albums are really shaped by the hit songs they produce. So that means you have to increase your chances of scoring a hit song on an album, right? You need to edge your risks. You need to like up your chances of scoring a hit song on an album, and the best way to do that is by reducing, as we said, reducing the tracks on the album and putting your best foot forward. Choose 10 of your strongest songs, 10 strong songs, put them on an album and put out there. So what this does is that it makes it difficult for listeners to pick their favorite songs. Every song on the album is good. Every song is popular. Today you listen to this one, you like it. Tomorrow you listen to that one, you like it. So you keep going back to it, right? And you have enough songs to service the sensibilities of listeners. So let's not just leave it on a theoretical basis, right? Let's be practical with it. Shay Vibes, for example. If you look at his albums, right, especially the last one, For Thy Kingdom Come, the songs on that album, 10 tracks, right? The qualities, they are not far apart. If you listen to Shay Vibes, you see that each song sounds like something that can become a hit song. Each track sounds like something that is a potential hit song. And listeners find it difficult to pick which one they like. And that's why the album is successful. Same thing with work of art. Each song is a potential hit. Each song sounds like a particular single that can be serviced. Nobody would have thought Lonely at the Top would be the monster hit it is now. It is the most, I think this is the weirdest hit record we've had since let's see, I think in the minute since Omale's Godly. You know, the way Afrobeat is, we have our hit songs are always party starters, strong bass line, percussions are there, lambas are there, you know, something people can resonate with, right? Vibe. If La Bianca was a Nigerian, I don't think people would blow up like that. Look at Whiskey's album. Essence wasn't a Nigerian hit. It blew up there. The songs we were fucking with here was the one with Burna Boy, Ginger, Ballon d'Or and stuff like that. I'm not sure Ballon d'Or was on the album. I think Ginger, that was the one we liked in Nigeria, right? So those kind of songs, we do not expect them to blow up. But the fact that Work of Art was filled with really, really good songs, that means listeners have to pick the one they like and they keep going back to the album, right? So you want to increase your chances of scoring a hit song, right? Because right now, the industry is shaped by hit songs. Albums are getting shorter lifespan. So if you want to get an album that's going to do well commercially, you have to look at the factors that are shaping the industry right now and play accordingly. So consider reducing the tracks on your album. Consider putting your strongest foot forward, you know, by getting very, very good songs on your album. Or entirely consider just dropping an EP. Because right now, industry is saturated. Listeners are overwhelmed by the amount of music that's dropping. And they just do not have the amount of time to spend on longer projects. And that's facts on.